I never wanted the white dress. I never wanted the vows. And I sure as hell didn't want to belong to a man whose name was whispered in fear across the city. But there I was, standing in silk and lace, while my father's trembling hands handed me over like I was some bargaining chip. My father, the man who had raised me to believe in freedom, had sold me, not to save me, but to save himself. The church bells rang, but they didn't sound holy. They sounded like the slamming of a cell door. Vincenzo Romano. Even the name curled like smoke in the air. Dangerous, suffocating. He stood at the altar waiting for me. Tall, impossibly controlled, with dark eyes that looked more like a warning than a welcome. His tuxedo was perfectly cut, his jaw carved from stone, his presence heavier than the cross that hung above us. The priest asked if I took him as my husband. My lips said, "I do." But my heart screamed louder than the organ behind me, "Run!" But I didn't. I let him kiss me in front of everyone, his mouth pressing against mine like he was sealing a contract, not touching a wife. By the time we left the church, I could feel the invisible chains around my wrists. Every guest smiled, pretending this was a union, not a sentence. And all I could think was, "You've just been buried alive, Elena." The limousine ride to the hotel was silent, except for the hum of the engine. He sat beside me, his hand resting on the armrest. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, sharp, masculine with an undertone of something metallic. Like blood disguised with roses, I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that I hated every breath of this, but when I turned my head, his eyes locked on mine and the words froze in my throat. There was something there. Not warmth, not kindness, but a kind of control that pinned me without touch. "You don't have to look so scared," he said at last, his voice low, dangerous, but almost bored. "I'm not scared." I lied. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. "You should be." The hotel was a palace of gold and glass, its chandeliers dripping crystals, its walls echoing with old money. They called it the Honeymoon suite, but it was nothing more than a cage with silk sheets. The bodyguards outside the door reminded me of that fact. I wasn't just his wife now. I was his possession. Inside, the room felt too big, too rich, too suffocating. I stood near the window, staring at the city lights. They looked like escape routes, like freedom glittering just beyond reach. My heart hammered with the thought, if I could just get out, if I could just run. Behind me, he loosened his tie, shrugged off his jacket. He moved with the quiet authority of a man who never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. "You look like a trapped bird," he said without turning. "I am." That got his attention. He faced me fully now, his gaze sharp enough to cut. Most men would have laughed it off, brushed it aside. But not him. He stepped closer, slow, measured, like a predator closing in. "Birds can fly," he murmured. "You can't," I didn't answer. If I did, my voice would have cracked. That night, when he finally went into the bathroom to shower, I saw my chance. My pulse thundered as I slipped off my heels and tiptoed across the room. My hands shook as I gripped the door handle, the hallway calling to me like salvation. I pulled it open and ran, my bare feet slapped against the carpeted halls, my lungs burning. The world narrowed down to one thought. Go, go, go. I made it to the stairwell, shoving the door open, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I didn't care. I was halfway down the stairs when the voice stopped me cold. Elena. Just my name. Spoken low, steady, and terrifying. I froze. Against my will, my head turned. He stood at the top of the stairs, damp hair clinging to his forehead, his shirt unbuttoned, his chest still wet from the shower. His eyes locked on mine with the force of a trigger being pulled. "Come back." My throat went dry. No. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between us. Then he moved. He didn't run. He didn't need to. Every step he took was deliberate, deadly, and I knew no matter how fast I was, he'd always catch me. I bolted anyway. By the time I reached the next landing, his hand closed around my wrist like a vice. He yanked me back against him, spinning me until my back hit the cold wall. My breath came in ragged gasps. His chest pressed hard against mine. "Don't," he growled, his voice sharp, animal. His hand braced beside my head, caging me in. His eyes burned into mine. A storm of fury and something darker. "Don't ever run from me." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to spit in his face. But all I could do was meet his stare, trembling but unbroken. "I'm not your prisoner. You are," he whispered, and the way he said it, calm, absolute, like a truth carved into stone, made my stomach twist with both rage and fear. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't a marriage. This wasn't even survival. This was war. And I had just lost the first battle. His hand was still clamped around my wrist when he dragged me back up the stairwell. I didn't fight. Not because I was giving in, but because my body was still locked in that strange, terrified paralysis. My heart had outrun me. I was shaking, the kind of trembling that starts in your bones and doesn't stop no matter how much you try to hold still. He didn't say a word, not one. The silence between us was louder than shouting, heavier than threats. His grip stayed iron, dragging me through the hall like I weighed nothing, back into the gilded cage of the suite. The door slammed. He released me only to throw his jacket onto a chair, his back to me. His shoulders rose and fell once, controlled, but the storm in him was obvious. "You ran," he said at last, his voice low but cutting. I had no choice. My voice broke, but I forced the words out. He turned. Those eyes, God, those eyes were dark enough to drown in, and they pinned me harder than his hands ever could. He crossed the space between us in 3 strides, stopping so close that his presence stole the air from my lungs. "There's always a choice," he murmured, leaning down, his face inches from mine. "But you made the wrong one." I swallowed hard. "Because I don't want this. I don't want you." It was reckless spitting those words at a man like Vincenzo Romano, but it was the truth clawing out of me. Something flickered in his gaze then. Not hurt, no, but a kind of dangerous recognition. Like he'd been expecting me to say that. Like it confirmed what he already knew. "You think wanting matters?" His hand shot up, catching my chin, forcing me to look at him. His fingers weren't gentle. "This isn't about want. It is about power." His words struck like cold steel. I jerked back, but he held firm. "Then you'll never have me," I hissed. For a heartbeat, silence hung thick between us. His thumb pressed against my jaw, his grip firm but not bruising. His eyes scanned mine like he was searching for something buried deep inside me. Defiance, fear, maybe both. Then slowly, he let go. He stepped back. And for the first time since the church bells rang, I saw something I didn't expect. Restraint. He could have forced me. He could have broken me right there. But he didn't. He turned, walked to the minibar, poured himself a drink with movements so calm they made my stomach knot tighter. "You're fire," he said finally, his voice softer now, almost reflective. "Wild, untamed. You'll burn yourself before you ever burn me." I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to mask the way my body still shook. "Then let me go before I do." He chuckled, low, humorless. He swirled the liquor in his glass, staring at it instead of me. "No, Elena, that's not how this works. You'll learn. I'll never learn." This time, he did smile. And it was worse than any threat. "We'll see." That night, he didn't touch me, not once. He lay on his side of the massive bed, his breathing steady, while I curled at the edge, wide awake, every nerve buzzing with fear and rage. But sleep came eventually, dragging me under. And when I woke, sunlight poured across the room. But the door was still locked. The guard still outside, my cage was gilded. But it was still a cage. And I swore to myself, as I stared at the ceiling, if he thinks I'll break, he doesn't know who I am. That morning was the first time I saw the world of Vincenzo Romano up close. He took me to breakfast in the hotel's private dining hall. People bowed their heads as he entered, their eyes flicking to me with curiosity. Some pity, some envy. He never let go of my hand. Not like a lover, but like a chain disguised as affection. "Smile," he murmured against my ear as we walked past a row of servers. His breath brushed my skin, making me stiffen. "They're watching." I forced my lips upward, but the smile didn't touch my eyes. He noticed. He noticed everything. At the table, he ate with measured calm, sipping coffee, cutting into eggs like this was any ordinary morning. Meanwhile, my stomach was too tight to swallow a bite. "Eat," he ordered softly. "I'm not hungry." He set down his fork. His gaze cut into me, patient but unrelenting. "You'll eat." I lifted my chin. "Or what?" That dangerous smile again. He leaned back in his chair, as if amused by the challenge. "You want to test me this early?" My pulse skipped. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, deliberately, I picked up my fork and stabbed a piece of fruit. I held his gaze the entire time as I brought it to my mouth. His eyes darkened, and he nodded once. Approval, but underneath it, I felt the truth. I hadn't won anything. I had just stepped into the rules of his game. When we returned to the suite, I went to the window again, staring out at the glittering freedom of the city below. "You'll try again," he said behind me, his voice calm, certain. I froze. "What? You'll try to run?" Again, my chest tightened. He said it like it wasn't a question, but a prophecy. He came up beside me, close but not touching, his reflection towering in the glass next to mine. "And when you do, Elena," his voice dropped to a whisper, a promise that sank into my bones. "I'll catch you." Every time. I hated him then. I hated him so much it burned. But beneath the rage, a flicker of something else stirred. Fear, yes, but also something far more dangerous. Because part of me believed him, and part of me wasn't sure if I wanted to keep running. Or if I wanted to see what would happen when he finally caught me for good. That was the first attempt. And it was just the beginning. The second night was worse than the first. Not because he touched me, but because he didn't. He didn't lay a hand on me, didn't even glance at me as anything more than a prisoner. He worked at the sleek black desk in the suite, making phone calls in Italian, voice calm, but heavy with threats that never needed to be spoken. I sat on the edge of the bed, every muscle coiled, listening to names I didn't recognize, orders I didn't understand, but I understood enough. Deals, blood, control. It was like watching a storm through a glass wall. I couldn't feel the rain, but I knew it could drown me. When he finally hung up, the silence felt too big. He poured himself a drink, slow and deliberate, then turned toward me. His eyes narrowed at the way I sat stiff, arms crossed like I could shield myself with bones and willpower alone. "You're quiet tonight," he said, voice smooth, dangerous. I swallowed hard. "What do you want me to say?" "Anything, a scream, a curse. The silence makes me think you're plotting. Maybe I am." The words slipped out before I could stop them. For a second, he just stared. Then he set his glass down and crossed the room in 3 strides. My breath caught as he reached me, his hand closing around my wrist again. Not as brutal as before, but firm enough to remind me there was no escape. "Stand up." I didn't move. His grip tightened. "Elena, stand." I rose, every nerve sparking, my chin tilted defiantly. That was when he did it. He pushed me back until my spine hit the wall. His body loomed close, his palm braced beside my head, his other hand still gripping my wrist. The wall was cold against my back, but his presence burned. I gasped, the sound sharp in the air between us. His eyes locked onto mine, dark and consuming, pulling me into something I couldn't name. "You don't get it yet," he said softly, dangerously. "You think this is a game. You think you can run or fight or bite, but you're mine, Elena. And the sooner you understand that, the easier this will be. I'll never belong to you." My voice shook, but I forced the words out anyway. Something flickered in his gaze, not anger, not amusement, but something hungrier. His face lowered until his lips hovered inches from mine. "Never say never," he whispered. My chest heaved. The wall pressed hard against my back, his body a cage in front of me. I could smell him, cologne and whiskey and something darker, something dangerous. Every instinct screamed at me to push him away, to slap him, to spit in his face. Instead, I froze. Because some treacherous part of me wasn't afraid of the fire. Some part of me leaned into it. His hand slid from my wrist to my jaw, tilting my face upward. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, softer now, almost tender, and that was worse. I could handle his fury. I didn't know how to handle this. "Say it again," he murmured. "What?" "That you'll never belong to me." I swallowed. The words tangled in my throat. I wanted to scream them, to carve them into stone. But with him this close, with his eyes burning through me, I couldn't, so I stayed silent. And silence, I realized, was as good as surrender. His mouth curved, not into a smile, but something darker, more satisfied. He leaned closer, his lips grazing the shell of my ear as he spoke. "You don't have to say it now. You will. One day." Then he stepped back. Just like that, he left me pressed against the wall, breathless, trembling, furious with him and with myself. Later, when the suite had gone quiet and he had returned to his desk, I sat on the edge of the bed again, fists clenched in the sheets. I hated him. I hated how he controlled me, how he twisted every word, how he trapped me in silence. But most of all, I hated the way my body betrayed me, the way my pulse raced when he touched me, The way heat curled low in my stomach when his eyes pinned me. The way I felt alive in the very moments I should have felt broken. This wasn't love. This wasn't even lust. It was war, and war makes strange things grow in the ruins. The next morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were darker, harder, like the fire inside me was visible now. He had pinned me against the wall, but he hadn't crushed me. Not yet. And I made myself a promise as I stared at that reflection. If he thought he could own me, he would bleed before I bowed. The morning after he pinned me against the wall, the world shifted. I thought he would keep me hidden in the suite, a caged bird behind locked doors. But instead, he woke me at dawn with a knock on the side of the bed and 3 words, "Get dressed. Now." My heart jolted. Why? His gaze flicked over me once, sharp, cold, because I said so. That was the beginning of the lesson. He drove me through the city in a black car that felt more like a hearse than a limousine. His men followed in another vehicle, shadows with guns tucked under their suits. I sat stiffly beside him, my hands curled in my lap, my stomach in knots. We passed glittering streets, markets just opening, people sipping coffee like the world was ordinary. I envied them. They weren't married to a man who could break necks with a word. Finally, the car stopped in front of a building that looked like nothing from the outside. Gray, nondescript. But when Vincenzo opened the door and guided me inside, I realized what it was. A headquarters. The Romano Empire's beating heart. The air smelled like leather, smoke, and money. Men in suits lined the walls, each one lowering his head as we passed. They didn't look at me. They looked at him. Always him. It was the first time I truly saw it. The absolute power he carried. The respect wasn't earned with kindness. It was carved with fear. He led me into a conference room with a long table of polished wood. Men were already waiting inside, their chatter cutting off the second he entered. "Sit," he told me, gesturing to the chair at his right. I hesitated. His eyes flicked toward me, that warning in them sharp as a blade. My body moved before my pride could argue. I sat. The men around the table exchanged glances, subtle but sharp. I wasn't supposed to be there, and they all knew it. But no one dared speak against him. Vincenzo took his seat at the head of the table, unhurried, calm. When he finally spoke, the room fell into silence. "2 nights ago," he began, his voice low but commanding. "The Ricci family tried to cut into my shipments. They failed. They lost 3 men. No one flinched. No one dared. We'll answer," he continued. "Not with words. With fire." One of the men leaned forward. "Boss, if we escalate?" Vincenzo's voice sliced the air. He leaned forward, his gaze locking on the man until he shrank back into his chair. "They drew first blood. I don't play chess with cowards. I burn the board." The silence afterward was absolute. Then he shifted back, calm again, sipping from his glass of water as if he hadn't just ordered death. My stomach turned. I could feel bile rise in my throat, but I stayed still. I couldn't show weakness. Not here, not beside him. The meeting went on for over an hour, each decision colder than the last. Names, territories, strategies. And through it all, Vincenzo was the center. Calm, ruthless, untouchable. Finally, when the men were dismissed, he turned to me. "You don't belong here," I whispered, unable to stop myself. His brow arched. "And yet here you are. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want blood on my hands." He studied me for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping until only I could hear it. "Whether you want it or not, Elena, blood is already on your hands. You married me. That makes you part of this world. Every deal I make, every life I take, you carry it now too." My breath caught. "That's not fair." "Fair?" He almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There's no fair in this world. There's only survival, and if you want to survive, you'll learn the rules." I shook my head, my chest tightening. "And if I refuse?" His eyes darkened, and for the briefest moment, I saw something raw in them. Something like disappointment. "If you refuse," he said softly, "this world will eat you alive." Back in the car, silence stretched thick between us. I stared out the window, my reflection pale against the glass. My mind replayed every word from that meeting, every casual order that meant death for someone. And then I looked at him. He sat so calm, so certain, his hands steady on the wheel. As if none of it touched him. As if lives meant nothing but numbers on a ledger. But I remembered the way his eyes had flickered when I said I didn't want blood. For one fleeting second, he had looked almost human. Almost. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me. I hated him. I feared him, but I couldn't stop thinking about that look in his eyes. About the way he had chosen to pin me against the wall instead of breaking me. About the strange, terrifying possibility that somewhere under all that control, there was a man who could still feel, and worse. I couldn't stop wondering what it would take to break him. That was the night I realized something dangerous. If I couldn't escape him, maybe I could learn his rules. Maybe I could use them against him. It wasn't surrender. It was survival. But as I closed my eyes, I couldn't help the thought that slithered into my mind, the one I hated myself for having. What if part of me didn't want to fight him at all? What if part of me wanted to know what it felt like to fall? It was raining the first time I saw him falter. The sweet windows blurred with water, the city lights smeared into gold and silver streaks. I stood at the glass, pressing my palm against the cold surface, wishing I could dissolve into the storm outside. Behind me, I heard the door open and close, the heavy tread of his footsteps, the quiet swish of a coat tossed carelessly onto a chair. I didn't turn around. "You've been staring out that window for hours," Vincenzo said. His voice was steady, but softer than usual, like the rain dulled his edges. "Maybe I'm hoping the storm will wash this whole place away," I murmured. He came closer. I could feel him before I could see him. His presence always entered the room before his body did. He stopped beside me, close enough that I could smell the rain on his clothes, sharp and clean, masking the iron beneath. "Storms don't wash things away," he said. "They reveal what's weak." I turned my head, daring to meet his eyes. "Is that what you tell yourself? That you're the one who survives while the rest of us drown?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. For once, his silence wasn't commanding, it was hollow. He poured himself a drink, but his hands weren't as steady as usual. His fingers lingered on the glass too long. His eyes flicked not to me, but to the table, where a single folded letter lay. It was unusual. He never left things lying around. He was meticulous, controlled, but tonight he left that letter there, as if it weighed too much to carry. I didn't ask. But I watched. He picked it up, unfolded it, scanned the words again. His expression didn't change, not much, but there was a faint tightening at the corners of his mouth, a shadow in his eyes. He caught me staring. "What?" he said sharply. "What is it?" "Nothing you need to know." My heart kicked against my ribs. "It matters to you. That's enough for me to know." For a moment, the mask slipped further. He exhaled slowly, closing his eyes, his shoulders dropping ever so slightly. He looked tired, human. "It's my brother," he said at last. The words came low, almost reluctant. "He's gone. Dead." The shock hit me harder than I expected. "I didn't know you had a brother. You weren't supposed to." The silence that followed was different from all the others we'd shared. This wasn't about power or intimidation. This was the kind of silence that fills a room when someone's armor cracks and the truth seeps through. "What happened?" I asked before I could stop myself. He stared at the glass in his hand. He trusted the wrong people. And trust, Elena, his gaze lifted, locking on mine, sharp again but not cold, is the most expensive mistake you can make. My chest tightened. For once I didn't see the Mafia boss. I saw a man who had lost something. Someone. And it terrified me more than his fury ever could. Because if he could bleed, if he could hurt, then maybe he wasn't untouchable. And if he wasn't untouchable, what did that mean for me? Later that night, I heard him in the next room. Not speaking. Not working. Just sitting in the dark, the faint clink of ice against glass every so often. I should have felt vindicated. I should have thought, good, let him suffer. Let him feel what he makes me feel. But instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy with something I didn't want to name. The next morning, the mask was back. The suit, the composure, the command. He was the boss again, untouchable, ruthless. But I had seen the crack. And once you see a crack, you can't unsee it. That day, when he caught my gaze across the breakfast table, something flickered between us. He knew I had seen him bleed, and I knew he hated that I had. But I also knew something else. Something far more dangerous. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just his prisoner. I was his witness. And maybe, just maybe, his weakness. The invitation wasn't really an invitation. It was an order. That night, I found myself stepping out of the limousine into the blinding glow of chandeliers spilling through tall windows. The Rossi estate was more fortress than home. Sprawling marble steps, carved lions watching over the entrance, guards stationed like shadows in the corners. Vincenzo offered his arm. Not out of courtesy, not of control. The message was clear. Stay beside me. Play your part. Inside, the air was thick with perfume, cigars, and whispered deals. A long table stretched across the dining hall. Silver candelabras casting golden light over crystal glasses and two perfect smiles. The Rossi family, their wives, their mistresses, their children all sat in careful order, a living hierarchy of power and fear. And then there was me, the outsider. Smile, Vincenzo murmured in my ear as we approached the head of the table. They can smell weakness. I forced my lips upward, though my hands trembled against the silk of my dress. The dinner began with laughter. Forced, sharp-edged laughter that cut more than it healed. I watched the way eyes darted, measuring, calculating. Even family here wasn't safe. Especially family. A man across the table raised his glass. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with thinning hair slicked back too neatly, his suit straining against his stomach. His eyes glittered with malice. To our beloved boss, he said, Vincenzo, may your reign last longer than your father's. May you never falter where others have. Slipped, the room quieted. The jab was too sharp, too pointed. Vincenzo's hand tightened over the stem of his wineglass, but his smile never wavered. Careful, Uncle Silvano, he said smoothly. A toast can sound like a threat if you don't watch your tongue. Silvano chuckled, but his gaze lingered on Vincenzo, challenging. And then, suddenly, his eyes flicked to me. And this must be the bride, he drawled, his voice dripping disdain. A lovely face, but tell me, Vincenzo, do you really think she belongs at this table? The air shifted like a blade being drawn. I froze. Heat climbed up my neck, but I kept my expression blank. The table waited for Vincenzo's reaction. Slowly, he set his glass down. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She sits where I say she sits, Silvano smirked. And what will she do when blood stains her shoes, eh? Run back to whatever pretty little world she came from? Laughter, sharp and cruel, rippled from a few seats down the table. But before I could blink, Vincenzo was on his feet. The scrape of his chair against the marble echoed like a gunshot. His hand slammed down on the table, rattling glasses, sending a fork clattering to the floor. His voice cut through the room, deadly calm but thunder beneath the surface. She will not be spoken of again in this way. She is mine, and anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. The laughter died instantly. The weight of his fury pressed down on everyone, silencing the hall. My heart thundered in my chest. Part of me wanted to scream at him, "Don't claim me like I'm property." But another part felt the way every other person at that table cowered beneath his words, and it twisted something inside me that I didn't want to admit. Dinner continued in brittle silence. No one looked directly at me again, but I felt every gaze, every calculation, every simmering resentment aimed at Vincenzo for what he had just done. Later, as the plates were cleared and the family began to scatter into smaller groups, I leaned toward him. "You didn't have to do that," I whispered. His eyes slid to mine, unreadable. Yes, I did. Why? To show them you own me? His jaw clenched. For a second I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. Because in this family, weakness is a death sentence. And they'll see you as my weakness if I let them. The words sent a shiver through me, not just because of what they meant, but because of the way he said them. He wasn't warning me. He was warning himself. On the ride home, the city lights streaked past the windows, silent witnesses to the storm brewing between us. I stared at him in the dark leather interior. His profile was sharp, carved from stone, his hand relaxed against the armrest, too relaxed. The kind of calm that came only when a man was fighting not to break something. Finally I spoke. You're not afraid of them, are you? He turned his head, just slightly, his eyes catching mine in the reflection of the window. I'm afraid of nothing, he said. Then after a pause, softer, except losing control. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. It wasn't just his enemies he was holding at bay, it was me. The suite was silent when we returned, but it wasn't the comfortable kind of silence. It was loaded, buzzing, like the moment before lightning strikes. I slipped off my heels and let them fall onto the carpet with a muted thud. My feet ached, but not as much as my chest. I could still feel the burn of every pair of eyes at that table, every laugh, every whisper. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to demand why he had dragged me there, why he had paraded me in front of them like a prize. But when I turned, words lodged in my throat. Vincenzo stood in the center of the room, undoing the buttons of his jacket, his movements precise, deliberate. He didn't look at me, not once. You shouldn't have defended me, I said finally, my voice sharper than I intended. He slid the jacket off his shoulders, draped it across the chair, and straightened his cuffs. I already told you. I had to. No, I pushed, stepping closer. You chose to. And now they'll hate me even more. You put a target on my back. His eyes flicked up then, dark and cutting. Better a target on your back than a knife in it. The words sliced through me, sharp and undeniable. I should have walked away. Instead, I stood there, heart pounding, watching him as he moved. There was something dangerous in the way he carried himself, something that made it impossible to look anywhere else. You're impossible, I whispered. And you, he said, stepping closer, don't understand the world you've been thrown into. I understand enough, I shot back. He tilted his head, studying me like he was peeling back layers I didn't even know I had. Then, in one swift movement, he closed the distance between us. I gasped when my back hit the wall. His hand pressed flat beside my head, caging me in, not touching me, not yet. But so close I could feel the heat radiating from him. You think I did that tonight to humiliate you? His voice was low, a growl that vibrated through my chest. No, Elena. I did it because the only thing more dangerous than being mine is them thinking you're nothing. My breath caught. The way he said my name, not as an order, not as a claim, but as if it mattered, unraveled something inside me. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other, the air between us tight enough to snap. His scent wrapped around me, leather, smoke, rain. His eyes flicked to my lips, then back up to my gaze. I hated him. God, I hated him. But the ache in my chest wasn't hate alone. It was something far more treacherous. Slowly his hand moved, not to grip me, not to trap me, but to brush a stray lock of hair from my face. The touch was feather-light, almost hesitant, as if he surprised himself by doing it. Vincenzo. My voice cracked on his name. His thumb lingered at my jawline, warm and steady. You're not ready for what this means, he whispered. And just like that, he stepped back. The sudden distance left me dizzy. My body leaned forward before my mind caught up, betraying me, wanting the closeness again. But he was already gone, retreating to the shadows of the room like nothing had happened. I pressed my palms against the wall, trying to steady my breath. Every nerve in me was awake, screaming, alive. This wasn't part of the plan. I was supposed to resist him hate him, survive him. But the first crack had formed, and I couldn't stop wondering what would happen when the whole wall came down. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft sounds of him moving in the other room. The storm wasn't outside anymore. It was in me, and the most terrifying part, I wasn't sure if I wanted it to end. The knock came at midnight. I sat up in bed instantly, my chest tight, my mind already racing. No one knocked here. The suite was a fortress. Knocking meant trouble. Vincenzo was already moving, shrugging into his jacket, sliding a pistol into the waistband of his trousers. His face was carved from ice. Stay here, but of course I didn't. I crept to the doorway as he opened the suite's door. 2 men stood outside, guards, though their expressions were tight, anxious. Between them, they dragged another man, his shirt torn, his lip bleeding, eyes wild with desperation. Vincenzo's gaze didn't flicker. Bring him in. The guards shoved the man forward and he stumbled, crashing onto the carpet. He tried to rise, but one of them kicked him back down. His hands were bound, wrists raw from the rope. Boss, one of the guards said, we caught him outside the safe house. He was passing information. A traitor. The word didn't need to be spoken. It hung in the air like gunpowder. Vincenzo stepped closer, crouching so he could look the man in the eye. Tell me, Paolo, he said almost gently. Who paid you? I didn't. The slap cracked through the room, sharp enough to make me flinch. Vincenzo's rings left blood blooming on the man's cheek. Don't insult me. His voice was calm but deadly. You've been with us since you were a boy, and you throw it away for what? Money? Fear? Which was it? Paolo sobbed, shaking, but didn't answer. Vincenzo stood slowly, his hand brushing over the gun at his hip. And then, to my horror, his eyes found mine in the doorway. Come here, Elena. My body went cold. No, I whispered, shaking my head. Yes. His voice was iron. Now. My legs carried me forward, trembling until I stood beside him. The traitor looked up at me, eyes wide, pleading. He wasn't older than 30. He could have been anyone. He could have been my brother, my cousin, someone I passed in the street. Why? Why am I here? My voice cracked. Vincenzo's hand settled at the small of my back, firm, unyielding. Because loyalty isn't proven in words. It's proven in what you're willing to see, to stomach. I shook my head harder. I can't, you can, and you will. His eyes bore into me, not cruel but unrelenting. This wasn't just about me. This was about the room, the men watching, the family that would whisper about whether Vincenzo's bride could stand at his side without flinching. Paolo sobbed again, blood dripping from his mouth. Please, don't let him. Something in me broke. My throat burned, but I forced myself to lift my chin. He's just a man. You don't have to. Vincenzo's hand pressed harder against my back. He chose this. He betrayed us. And in this world, betrayal is death. His words were final. I wanted to scream, to shove him away, to stop what was coming. But I didn't move. I couldn't. The sound of the gunshot was deafening. Paolo's body crumpled, lifeless, and I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Blood spread across the carpet in dark, ugly patterns. The guards dragged the corpse away without a word, as if this were routine. And maybe it was. Vincenzo holstered the gun and turned to me. My whole body shook, my breaths ragged. You didn't look away, he said quietly. Tears stung my eyes. I wanted to, but you didn't. His gaze lingered on me, something unreadable in his expression. Approval? Relief? Or something darker, something even he couldn't name. He reached out then, brushing a tear from my cheek with the pad of his thumb. The tenderness of the gesture made me recoil. Why show me that? I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. Because, he said, his tone low, intimate, if you're going to survive beside me, Elena, you need to understand what survival costs. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing Paolo's face, without hearing the crack of the gun. But worse than the memory of his death was the truth I couldn't escape. I hadn't looked away, and that meant something inside me was changing. something I wasn't sure I could ever undo. Didn't speak to him the rest of that night. I shut myself in the bedroom, curling against the headboard, knees pulled tight to my chest. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The smell of gunpowder still clung to the air, to my hair, to my skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Paolo's blood spilling across the carpet. And every time, I heard Vincenzo's voice. You didn't look away. That was what haunted me most. Not the body, not the shot, not even the way the others had looked at me with new calculation. No. It was that moment. My moment. When I had stood frozen, staring, unable to turn away from the violence. Something inside me had stayed rooted, unwilling to miss a second, and it terrified me. The door opened sometime past 3. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate, filling the room like a storm rolling in. You should be asleep. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He sat on the edge of the bed, his back to me, his hands pressed against his knees. His shirt was half unbuttoned, the line of muscle in his back tense, corded. For the first time, he didn't look like a man in control. He looked like someone carrying the weight of every soul he'd condemned. I hated him for it. For making me a witness, for pulling me into his darkness, for forcing me to carry it too. You wanted me to see that? My voice was low, raw. Yes, why? Because now you can't pretend you're not part of this. The words hit me like a blow. My throat closed. I'm not one of you. He turned then, slow, deliberate. His eyes locked on mine, burning, unreadable. You are. Whether you want to admit it or not, that was it. The spark. I shoved at his chest, fury breaking through the numbness. You don't get to decide that for me. His hand shot out, catching my wrist, pulling me closer. I decide everything, Elena. I struggled, pushing against him. But the fight only pulled us tighter together, until my breath was mingling with his. My fists pounded against his chest once, twice, and then froze, caught between rage and something far more dangerous. His hand slid to the back of my neck, holding me in place. Not gentle, not cruel, just claiming, you think you hate me, he murmured, his breath hot against my lips. But hate feels a lot like desire when the fire's this close. My pulse thundered in my ears. You're wrong, am I? The tension snapped. His mouth crashed against mine, fierce, unrelenting. The kiss was nothing like tenderness. It was war, it was fire, it was every unsaid word, every locked door between us torn open at once. I should have pulled away. I should have screamed. Instead, I clung to him, fingers tangling in his shirt, dragging him closer. The taste of him was sharp, intoxicating, dangerous. When his hands roamed lower, gripping my waist, pinning me beneath him, I gasped against his mouth, not from fear, but from the terrifying truth that I wanted it. Every inch of me burned where he touched, every nerve alive, screaming. He pulled back suddenly, his forehead pressed to mine, his breathing ragged. This is a mistake, he growled, though his grip on me never loosened. Then stop, I whispered, my voice trembling. But neither of us moved. Seconds stretched like hours, the air thick with heat and danger. And then slowly, his lips brushed mine again. Softer this time, almost reverent, as if he hated himself for needing it. The gentleness undid me more than the violence ever could. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were wild, almost desperate. You don't understand what you're doing to me. Tears blurred my vision, and you don't understand what you're turning me into. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, two people trapped in a fire neither of us knew how to escape. And deep down, I knew the truth. Something had shifted tonight, and there was no going back. The silence after that kiss was deafening. I sat there on the bed, my chest heaving, my lips still swollen from the war we'd just waged. He stood across the room, pacing, one hand dragging through his hair, the other flexing like he wanted to punch the walls just to keep from reaching for me again. We were both prisoners of the same storm, locked in the same cage, but neither of us willing to admit it. You shouldn't have kissed me, I said finally. The words were brittle, hollow. He stopped, his back to me, shoulders rising and falling with ragged breaths. You kissed me back. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. That doesn't mean... It means everything. He turned, and the look in his eyes was a knife to the chest. Fierce, desperate, hungry. But there was something else, too. Something I had never seen before. Something that almost looked like fear. I can't. I shook my head, clutching the sheets in my fists. I can't feel this. Not for you. Not after what I saw tonight. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. Don't confuse what I did with who I am. My laugh was bitter, sharp. You pulled a trigger. You watched a man die at your feet, and you think you get to separate yourself from that? He flinched, just barely, but enough that I saw it. A crack. You think I don't pay for it? His voice was low, dangerous, but it shook at the edges. Every face, every name, every scream. They don't leave me, Elena, they live in me. Every night I froze. I had never heard him sound like this. Never heard him admit weakness. Not to anyone. He sank into the chair across from me, his hands pressed together, his elbows on his knees. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then, so softly I almost missed it, he said, I never wanted this life. The words hit harder than a gunshot. I stared at him, unable to move, unable to breathe. Then why stay in it? He looked up, meeting my eyes with something raw, stripped bare. Because leaving isn't an option. Not when you're born into it. Not when it's carved into your name, your blood, your bones. You can fight it, but it wins. It always wins. He leaned back, exhaling like the weight of the whole world sat on his chest. I killed my first man at 17, he continued, voice flat, distant. My father handed me the gun, said it was the only way to prove I was his son. And afterward, he poured me a drink like I'd just passed some twisted exam. From then on, I stopped being a boy. I became him. His eyes burned into mine, but they weren't cold. They were haunted, and the worst part? His voice cracked. I was good at it, too good, and I've been paying for it ever since. The room spun around me. I had spent every waking hour convincing myself he was a monster, an unfeeling, ruthless executioner. But this was something I hadn't prepared for. A man who hated himself more than I could ever hate him. You want me to feel sorry for you? My voice trembled, but not with rage. With something else I didn't want to name. No, he said simply. I want you to know the truth before you decide to hate me. The confession gutted me, because the truth was I should have hated him. I should have clung to it, wrapped myself in it like armor, but instead, I felt my walls trembling, threatening to collapse. He rose then, moving toward me, slow, careful, as if he knew I was standing on a ledge, and one wrong move would send me over the edge. He stopped just in front of me, his hand hovering near my face, not touching, waiting. Elena, he whispered, my name breaking in his throat. I don't know what this thing is between us. I only know it's the first thing that's felt real in years, and it terrifies me more than any gun, any enemy, any war. Tears burned hot at the corners of my eyes. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. And before I could stop myself, before I could think of all the reasons I shouldn't, I reached up and touched his hand. Just that. A single touch. But it felt like stepping off the edge of the world. That night, we didn't touch again. We didn't kiss. We just sat in the dim light, breathing the same air, sharing the same silence. But something had shifted forever. The Mafia boss who had pinned me against a wall, who had shown me blood and fear and fire, had just confessed his soul to me, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to hate him again. The dawn broke sharp and gray, slicing through the blinds in fractured lines that painted his face in shadow. I hadn't slept. Neither had he. We'd sat there all night, orbiting each other like two stars on the verge of collision, the silence dense enough to suffocate. His confession still echoed in the air, clinging to me, crawling under my skin until I didn't know where my hatred ended and something else began. When the knock came, it wasn't gentle. It rattled the door like thunder. A warning, a threat. He was on his feet before I could breathe, gun in hand, eyes snapping from soft and broken to sharp, lethal steel in an instant. The transformation chilled me. He was no longer the man who whispered his fears in the dark. He was the boss again. "Stay here," he hissed, moving toward the door. But something in me rebelled. "Don't tell me what to do." His eyes cut to mine, burning with something I couldn't name. "Elena, please," that word, please, from him. It was almost enough to root me to the bed. Almost. The door crashed open. 3 men stormed inside, faces hard, guns drawn. I recognized them instantly. Not as men. Rivals. The kind of men who didn't knock unless they came to kill. The world narrowed. His gun was up, minefield eyes scanning, calculating. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd just watch him slaughter them like he had the man the night before. But then, one of them grabbed me. A rough arm locked around my throat, dragging me back against his chest, the cold press of steel biting into my skin. My breath caught. My body went rigid. "Elena!" His voice was a roar, guttural, primal, the kind of sound that made the hair rise on your neck. His gun swung toward us, his whole body trembling like the sight of me in another man's grip was more dangerous than any bullet aimed at him. "Drop it." The man snarled into my ear, pressing the barrel harder into my jaw. "Or she's dead." Time stretched, each second an eternity. I could see the war in his eyes. The boss who never surrendered. The man who could never be seen as weak, and the part of him that would burn the world to ashes if I bled in front of him. His hand shook. For the first time, I saw him hesitate. "You don't want to do this," he growled, his voice like steel dragged over stone. "Funny," the rival sneered. "That's exactly what I want to do." The gun dug deeper into my skin, and my lungs screamed for air. But instead of terror, something wild rose inside me, a fire I hadn't felt before, because I realized something in that moment, something dangerous. He wasn't afraid of dying. He wasn't afraid of killing. He was afraid of losing me. And if they saw that, if they realized I was his weakness, I was already dead. My heart thundered. My voice broke the silence before I could think. "Shoot him." The words stunned even me. The man holding me barked out a laugh, but I felt the tension ripple through his grip. His eyes locked on mine. "Elena, do it!" I snapped, fire surging through me. "Show them you don't break. Not for me. Not for anyone." His hand tightened on the gun, his face carved in anguish. But I wasn't afraid. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of him, of them, of this life. Because I knew he wouldn't miss. And then, chaos. A flash, a crack, the world erupting into gunfire. The man holding me jerked, his grip loosening, his body collapsing to the floor with dead weight. I stumbled free, gasping, just as he was there, his arm wrapping around me, his chest heaving like he'd been the one suffocating. The other 2 men were already down. I didn't even see it happen. He moved too fast, too precise. A storm in human form, and then it was quiet again, except for the sound of my pulse hammering in my ears, except for the way his hand trembled on my arm, the way his eyes searched me like he was memorizing every breath I took. "You're safe," he rasped, but his voice was broken, raw. "You're safe." But I wasn't sure that was true, because the men who had just stormed the room weren't just enemies. They were a message, and I wasn't sure if the real danger was out there, or sitting right in front of me, his hand still shaking where it touched mine. The room smelled of gunpowder and iron. It clung to the walls, soaked into the sheets, tangled in my hair until I couldn't breathe without tasting the metallic sting of violence. 3 bodies lay sprawled across the floor, their blood inching across the carpet like veins searching for a heart. I couldn't look away, not from the carnage. Not from him. Vince stood in the center of it, chest heaving, gun still loose in his hand. The boss, the executioner, my captor, and the man who had just saved my life. The contradiction tore through me, raw and jagged, gratitude, horror, something that felt far too close to trust. I pressed a hand to my throat, the ghost of that gun still burning against my skin. My knees wanted to give out, but I forced myself to stand tall. I refused to crumble in front of him. He turned to me. His eyes weren't steel anymore, they were fire. Not rage, not command, fear, and something else. Something that made my pulse hitch. "Elena," he breathed, stepping closer. I flinched, just slightly, but enough. His face hardened like I'd slapped him. He holstered the gun, dragged a hand down his face, and for a moment I saw the weight crushing him. The cracks in the armor he fought so hard to keep intact. "Pack your things," he said finally, voice rough. "We're leaving?" My voice was sharper than I meant. "Where exactly?" "Another cage?" His jaw clenched. "Another safe house. They know where you are now. You're not—" He stopped himself, the words choking off. "You can't stay here." I wanted to spit at him, to tell him I was never safe with him. But the truth clawed at me. If those men had gotten a second longer, I'd be cold on the floor, because of my father, because of the debts he'd carved into my skin without ever asking, the sins he'd traded away until there was nothing left but me. The shadow of him hung heavy over me, pressing like a hand around my throat even though he was miles away. He had given me to Vince to pay his way out of ruin, his daughter for his life, and now I was the one who would pay every day for his cowardice. "Don't!" Vince snapped suddenly, like he could read my thoughts. "Don't what?" "Don't look at me like I'm him." His voice was a whip, lashing across the air. "I didn't sell you. I didn't betray you. I'm the reason you're still breathing." His words cut deeper than the gun pressed to my throat ever had. Because they were true, and because some part of me wanted to believe him. "You're the reason I'm trapped." I shot back, my voice breaking. "Do you think that's any better?" His eyes closed, just for a heartbeat. When they opened again, they were darker, softer, almost pleading. "I'm the reason you're not in the ground," he said quietly. "Hate me for everything else. But don't forget that." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to claw at his chest until he bled the way I was bleeding inside. Instead, I sank onto the edge of the bed, my hands trembling against the sheets. The silence was unbearable. Finally, I whispered, "They came for me." "Not you," his head snapped toward me. His whole body went taut like I'd struck a nerve. "What are you saying?" he demanded. "I'm saying—" I forced myself to meet his eyes. "They didn't come to take down the boss. They came for your bride, for the girl my father sold." The words tasted like ash. For the first time since I'd met him, Vince looked lost, like the ground had shifted beneath him. He crossed the room in 2 strides, crouching in front of me, his hands braced on his knees. Not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him radiating against my skin. "You think you were just some pawn in your father's game," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "But Elena, you're mine now, which means your leverage, your power, and every man who wants to see me burn will come for you first." My stomach twisted. The world tilted. He wasn't wrong, and the truth settled heavy in my chest. No matter how much I fought him, no matter how much I dreamed of escape, I wasn't just my father's daughter anymore. I was Vince Romano's wife, which meant the blood on the carpet was only the beginning. He rose to his feet, commanding, controlled once more. "Pack, we move in 10 minutes. I wanted to tell him no, to scream until the walls cracked, but my hands moved on their own, gathering clothes, stuffing them into a bag, because the truth was colder than anything else. If I didn't stay at his side, I wouldn't last a day, and somewhere in the hollow of my chest, a dangerous thought took root. Maybe I didn't just fear him. Maybe I feared who I was becoming because of him. The city bled past the tinted windows in a blur of gray and gold. Morning traffic snarled, horns blaring, but inside the armored car there was only silence, thick, suffocating. He sat across from me, his suit immaculate despite the chaos we'd left behind. His hands rested on his thighs, steady, but his jaw was a clenched vice. I could feel the tension rolling off him in waves, see the storm behind his stillness. Every mile we drove pulled me further from the girl I'd been. Every second pressed me deeper into the role I never wanted. His wife. His shield, his weakness. I couldn't decide which truth was worse. When we pulled into the underground garage of another fortress he called a safe house, I almost laughed. The same concrete, the same cameras, the same men with dead eyes standing guard. Another gilded cage, another set of locks. The moment the door shut behind us, I turned on him. How long do you think this will last? My voice was sharp, my chest tight. Another house, another room, another night waiting for men to kick down the door. His eyes flicked to me, dangerous and unreadable. As long as it takes for what? Until they kill me? Until they break you through me? He stepped closer. I should have backed away, but I didn't. Couldn't. Until they learn what I already know, he said, his voice low, heavy. That nobody takes you from me. Nobody touches what's mine. The word mine sliced through me. I hated it. I hated the way my stomach twisted, the way my body betrayed me with heat that curled low in my belly. So I did the only thing I could. I pushed back. You talk about me like I'm property, I spat. Like I'm a thing to be guarded, displayed. But you can't even trust me to stand on my own 2 feet. You think protecting me means locking me in a room and throwing away the key. That's not protection, Vince. That's control. His eyes darkened. His hand shot out, bracing against the wall beside my head, caging me without even touching. You think I don't trust you? His voice was a growl, rough around the edges. You think this is about control? Elena, his chest heaved. I can't risk it. I can't risk you. Don't you understand? If you fall, I fall, and I don't get back up. His words hit harder than any shove. He wasn't just a man guarding his prize. He was a man terrified of losing the one crack in his armor he couldn't seal. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I had power. Not the kind he wielded with guns and men and money, but something sharper, more dangerous. I could break him. I lifted my chin, forcing myself to hold his gaze. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you dragged me into your war. His nostrils flared. His hand pressed harder into the wall, so close I could feel the tremor running through him. You think I wanted this? His voice cracked just once. You think I wanted you in this? If I could have burned your father's deal to ash, I would have. But he put you in my hands, Elena. And his throat bobbed, the words strangled. I can't let you go. The raw honesty in his voice nearly undid me. Nearly. But I couldn't let him see me bend. Not yet. So I whispered the only weapon I had. Then maybe you're weaker than I thought. The silence after those words was shattering. His eyes locked on mine, a storm raging behind them. For a heartbeat, I thought he would break, that he would slam his mouth to mine, that his need would devour us both. But instead, he pushed away, pacing across the room like a caged animal. You'll destroy me, he muttered, almost to himself. You'll destroy me before anyone else gets the chance. Something in my chest ached at the truth in his voice. But I couldn't let myself drown in it. Not when I knew the rules of his world. Trust was a blade, and I was learning how to sharpen mine. That night, lying awake in yet another strange bed, his words circled in my head until they twisted into something dangerous. If I had the power to break him, then maybe I also had the power to survive him. The question that kept me awake, burning holes into the ceiling, was simple and deadly. Would I use that power to save us both, or to destroy him first? The mansion wasn't silent. It breathed. Every corridor hummed with low voices, footsteps, the click of guns being checked, rechecked. Shadows slipped past the walls like wraiths. Men loyal enough to die for him, or kill for him without hesitation. But none of it felt safe, because I knew something he didn't. I'd overheard it in the hall when I slipped from my room. Hushed voices I wasn't meant to catch. 2 of his men. Their words were quick, sharp, like knives exchanged in the dark. They'll strike again tonight. Orders are clear. Through her. Through me. The enemy wasn't coming through the gates, wasn't planning to fight his army of guards head on. They were coming through me, the fragile link in his chainmail. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I had a choice. If I told him, if I warned him, he'd lock me down tighter than before. Another cage, another set of chains disguised as protection. But if I kept silent, if I let them come, maybe I'd finally be free. Maybe they'd take me, use me, break him, and in the chaos I'd slip away. Freedom at the cost of his empire, escape written in blood. The weight of it pressed against my chest, stealing my breath. Because deep down, under the fury, under the defiance, under the fear I clung to like armor, there was something I couldn't ignore anymore. I didn't want him to fall. I didn't want him dead, and I hated myself for it. When I found him in his study, he was a silhouette of control. Sleeves rolled, tie discarded, whiskey glass in hand, papers scattered across the desk like the bones of some ancient game only he knew how to play. His eyes lifted when I entered, and for a second, just a second, the boss slipped away. His gaze softened, the kind of softness that burned me more than his fury ever could. "Elena," he said like my name was a prayer. I froze in the doorway, torn in half by a secret that could decide both our fates. He gestured me closer. I moved before I could think, every step heavy with the choice clawing inside me. "They'll come tonight." The words ripped out of me before I even realized I'd spoken them. His glass stilled midair. His eyes sharpened, fire hardening into steel. "What?" "I heard them," I said, forcing myself to keep steady, to sound like I wasn't shaking apart inside. "2 of your men. They said the enemy will strike again tonight. Through me." The silence that followed was colder than a blade at my throat. He rose, slow, deliberate, like a storm gathering strength. He circled the desk, stopping inches from me. His hand lifted. I braced for the grip, the force, the demand. Instead, his fingers grazed my cheek, feather light. "You could have stayed silent," he murmured. "You could have let them come. Why didn't you?" The question sliced deeper than any threat, because I didn't have an answer I could admit. I should have told him I wanted leverage, that I couldn't escape if he were dead, that survival was all I cared about. But my voice betrayed me, because I didn't want to see you fall. The confession hung between us, raw and trembling. His hand froze, his thumb brushing against my skin like he couldn't decide if he wanted to hold me or crush me. His eyes, God, his eyes burned like wildfire. "You'll be the death of me," he whispered, almost reverent, and before I could pull away, his mouth was on mine. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, consuming. A collision of fury and need that stole the breath from my lungs. His hands anchored me, pulled me against him like he could fuse us together, like letting go wasn't an option. And for a moment, I didn't fight. For a moment, I burned with him, tangled in something too dangerous to name. When I finally tore back, gasping, my heart was in my throat. "I warned you," I whispered. "Now what?" His answer was a vow carved in stone. "Now I make sure they never touch you." I should have felt relief. Instead, dread coiled in my stomach. Because the choice I made wasn't just about survival anymore. I had tethered myself to him, bound by a truth neither of us could undo. And tonight, when the attack came, I knew one thing with brutal certainty. Whatever side I chose, trust or betrayal, it would destroy us both. The night arrived like a storm, heavy and suffocating, slamming against the safe house walls with the weight of inevitability. I could feel it in my bones before I saw it. The whisper of danger riding the wind, a tremor running through the floor beneath my heels. Vince moved like a predator, all sinew and control, every step measured, every glance sweeping the shadows. I knew the moment we stepped into this world, there would be no turning back. The first gunshot shattered the silence. The walls shook. The glass rattled, and my chest constricted with fear. Fear for him, fear for me, fear for everything we'd built in the fragile hours since the first shot in the suite. Chaos erupted. Men crashed through doors, shouting in tongues I didn't understand, their weapons blazing. Vince moved like lightning, every strike precise, every motion lethal. His voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "Get down! Protect her!" I dropped to the floor, pressed against the wall, clutching the hem of my jacket like a shield. My hands shook, my nails biting into my palms. Through the smoke and sparks, I saw him. a figure carved from shadow and fire, fighting through the storm like he was part of it. And then my heart stopped. One of the intruders had gotten past the perimeter. A man I hadn't even noticed until he was inches from me, gun raised. I froze, every instinct screaming. And then Vince was there. He threw himself between us, the world slowing to a crawl. The gunshot cracked, deafening. The man fell, lifeless, the air heavy with the smell of gunpowder and blood. Vince's hands trembled just slightly as he pushed me behind him, eyes blazing with a fury so raw I thought it might burn the walls down. "Stay behind me," he growled, voice ragged. I nodded, breathless, shaking, terrified, but alive. The attack didn't end. They came in waves. The room became a battlefield, every shadow a potential death, every step a gamble. I realized with a sinking chill that survival wasn't about strength. It was about choices. And the choice I had made, to warn him, had tipped the scales. Because my knowledge had saved him. But it also made me the target. One of the men lunged for me, his grip strong, merciless. I shrieked, twisting, and a shot rang out. Vince had turned just in time, his hand catching mine as we stumbled together. "Don't you ever hide from me again," he snarled, dragging me behind him. I swallowed a scream, pressed my body to his, feeling the heat, the danger, the raw, unyielding power of the man who had become both my protector and my cage. Minutes bled into an eternity. The air was thick with smoke, with blood, with fear. Every scream echoed like a promise of death. At some point, I found myself pressed against him, chest to chest, hearts hammering in a synchronized rhythm that made the chaos outside fade to a background hum. "Why did you tell me?" His breath was hot, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "You could have saved yourself because—" I choked, my hands clutching his jacket, holding on to him like a lifeline. "Because I couldn't let you die. Not like this. Not ever." His grip tightened, knuckles white. "You think this world will forgive you for caring about me? I don't care," I whispered. And that's when the breaking point came. A second wave, stronger, deadlier. They weren't just coming for him anymore. They were coming for both of us. Vince reacted with the speed of a man who had survived 1,000 lifetimes of danger. Every shot, every punch, every command was measured. But this time I moved with him. No more hiding. No more shadows. I grabbed a dropped gun, my hands shaking but my aim steady. The first pull of the trigger was a shock. The second was adrenaline. The third was terrifyingly liberating. I wasn't just his bride, his pawn, his hostage anymore. I was part of the fight, part of the storm, part of him. By the time the last man fell, the room was a war zone. Smoke curled into the corners, bodies lay sprawled, and the metallic scent of blood filled every inch of the air. Vince pressed me against him, arms tight around my waist. His forehead rested against mine. His lips barely touched my temple. "You're alive," he whispered, and I could hear the tremor in his voice. "I am," I said, and for the first time, I believed it. But as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving raw exhaustion behind, I knew the truth. The danger wasn't over. The war wasn't over. And the bond we'd forged in fire, blood and confessions, was no longer fragile. It was unbreakable, but just as lethal. Because now nothing could protect us from the next choice. The next betrayal. The next test of trust. And deep down, I realized I would follow him into the fire, even if it consumed me completely. The city outside was quiet again, but the silence was brittle, like glass waiting to shatter. Smoke still drifted from the safe house's shattered windows, curling into the early morning sky. The air reeked of gunpowder and iron, of adrenaline and fear. And, beneath it all, something dangerous that had settled between us. Vince knelt beside me, hands resting on my shoulders, eyes scanning for threats that no longer existed. His chest heaved, but the tension hadn't left him. It had shifted, rechanneled into something protective, possessive, unyielding. I studied him, the man who had pulled me into this world, shattered every wall I had built, and somehow made me want to stay. My pulse was still racing, my hands trembling, but this time it wasn't fear, it was recognition. He reached out, brushing a hand over my hair, soft, almost reverent. "You're still here," he murmured, not as a question, but a statement of disbelief. "I'm still here," I whispered back. And for the first time, I believed it myself. We sat like that for what felt like hours, the aftermath of violence settling around us like a storm passing over a battlefield. Our breaths synchronized, our hearts echoing in rhythm, fragile yet unbreakable. "Do you understand now?" he asked quietly. His eyes held me, burning into my soul. "Do you understand what it means to be mine? And what it means for me to be yours?" I swallowed, feeling the weight of everything. The blood, the confessions, the fire we'd survived. "I think I do," I admitted, "and I think I'm ready." He pulled me close, holding me like he could keep the world from collapsing around us. His lips brushed my hair, my temple lingering, claiming without cruelty, without force. "Just presence. Just fire contained. Ready for what?" he asked softly, though I could hear the edge in his voice. "For this," I said, pressing my forehead to his. "For the world you live in. For the storm. For you." A low rumble of a laugh escaped him, not amused, not playful, but a sound of release, of tension spilling into something dangerous and intimate. "You're insane," he whispered. "Maybe," I admitted, "but I think I've always been a little insane." The night had taken everything from us, the illusion of safety, the calm, even the possibility of ordinary life. But in the wreckage, we had something neither of us expected, each other. I realized then that survival wasn't enough. Not for him. Not for me. We needed more than that. We needed trust, raw and dangerous, even if it could destroy us. We needed desire, even if it was laced with fury, and somehow, amidst the blood and the fear, we found it. He lifted my chin, his fingers firm and warm. His eyes were dark, endless, like a storm contained just beneath the surface. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together. No hiding, no running. Do you understand?" I nodded, feeling the weight of my choices, of every step that had led me here, and of every moment that would come. "Together," I whispered. The word tasted like fire and steel, like danger and promise. And for the first time, I didn't flinch. Outside, the world waited. Threats, betrayals, enemies. They were all still out there, lurking, waiting for the moment we faltered. But inside the walls, between us, there was only the storm we had survived and the storm we were about to face together. Vince pressed his forehead to mine one last time, and I felt it in every nerve, every heartbeat, the edge of forever. The danger hadn't ended. It would never end. But neither would this. The raw, impossible, intoxicating bond forged in fire, blood, and confession. We were no longer just bride and boss, captive and captor. We were something new, something unbreakable, and in that moment, I understood the truth of it all. Love in this world was never safe, but neither was survival, and we were ready to chase both, to the very edge of forever.